In the eastern region of Burkina Faso, when a drilling team pulled their drill at a depth of 435 meters, black liquid gushed forth. The engineers couldn't believe it. When the analyses were confirmed, news spread quickly. One of Africa's poorest countries possessed billions of barrels of crude oil. Within 24 hours, as CEOs of Western oil giants prepared their private jets, a phone rang in Ibrahim Traoré's office. The caller was the most dangerous man in the world oil market. Black Gold War, English script, hook. In the eastern region of Burkina Faso, when a drilling team pulled their drill at a depth of 435 meters, black liquid gushed forth. The engineers couldn't believe it. When the analyses were confirmed, news spread quickly. One of Africa's poorest countries possessed billions of barrels of crude oil. Within 24 hours, as CEOs of Western oil giants prepared their private jets, a phone rang in Ibrahim Traoré's office. The caller was the most dangerous man in the world oil market. Introduction. The sun beat down mercilessly on the makeshift drilling site in Burkina Faso's eastern province of Gourma. What had begun as a routine water exploration project had suddenly transformed into something far more significant. Dr. Aminata Konate, head of Burkina Faso's Geological Survey Department, stared in disbelief at the black substance coating her gloved hands. "Run the tests again," she instructed the technician beside her, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "And call the president's office immediately." 12 hours later, in a secured conference room in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré studied the geological reports before him. The room was silent except for the hum of air conditioning. Present were only his most trusted advisors: Defense Minister Ouagadougou, Economy Minister Traore, and Dr. Konate herself. The preliminary estimates suggest a reserve of approximately 3.8 billion barrels, Dr. Konate explained, pointing to a map where the drilling site was marked. If confirmed, this would make Burkina Faso the sixth largest oil reserve holder in Africa. Traoré looked up from the reports. "And the quality?" "Exceptional," Dr. Konate replied. "Low sulfur, light crude. Precisely the type that commands premium prices on the international market." Economy Minister Traore couldn't contain his excitement. "Mr. President, this changes everything. Our annual budget is just over $4 billion. Even at conservative estimates, this oil reserve is worth more than $300 billion. We could transform our country within a generation. Infrastructure, healthcare, education." "If we control it," interrupted Defense Minister Ouagadougou, his expression grave. "History tells us that when African nations discover valuable resources, what follows isn't always prosperity." Traoré nodded, well aware of what Ouagadougou was implying. Throughout Africa, the discovery of natural resources had often led to increased foreign interference, political instability, and in many cases, outright conflict. The resource curse was a well-documented phenomenon. "How many people know about this discovery?" Traoré asked. "Currently only those in this room, the drilling team, and a handful of technicians," responded Dr. Konate. "The site has been secured and classified as a water exploration project. But Mr. President, such news cannot stay hidden for long." As if on cue, Traoré's secure phone line rang. His security chief, Colonel Diallo, rarely used this line except in emergencies. "Mr. President," Diallo's voice came through clearly, "our communications monitoring system has detected unusual activity. Multiple encrypted messages have been sent from somewhere in Ouagadougou to Paris, London, and Houston within the last 2 hours, all using terminology consistent with oil exploration." The room fell silent. The news had already leaked. "There's more, sir," Diallo continued. "A private jet registered to EnerGlobal Corporation has filed a flight plan from Paris to Ouagadougou, arriving tomorrow morning." Traoré's eyes narrowed. EnerGlobal was one of the world's largest oil conglomerates, known for its aggressive acquisition strategies and close ties to Western intelligence agencies. Its CEO, Victor Durand, had a reputation for obtaining lucrative oil contracts in developing countries through means that rarely benefited the local population. "So it begins," Traoré said quietly, looking at each person in the room. "From this moment, we are in a race against time. The question is not whether we have oil, but whether it will be a blessing or a curse for Burkina Faso." Just then, his personal phone rang, a number known only to a select few. The screen displayed "unknown caller." Traore answered and put it on speaker. "President Traore," came a smooth, accented voice. "Victor Durand here. I believe congratulations are in order for your country's fortunate discovery. I'm currently on my way to Ouagadougou. I think we have much to discuss about Burkina Faso's bright future." By the next morning, the news had spread throughout the capital. Though no official announcement had been made, rumors of the oil discovery had ignited both excitement and concern among the population. Outside the presidential palace, a small crowd had gathered, some waving signs that read, "Our oil, our future," and "No foreign control." Inside, Ibrahim Traoré prepared for his meeting with Victor Durand. His team had worked through the night, analyzing every aspect of Burkina Faso's legal framework for natural resource management and studying the patterns of EnerGlobal's operations in other African nations. Their standard approach is a 30-70 split, explained Economy Minister Kabore, pointing to the briefing document. 30% for the host country, 70% for EnerGlobal. They package it with promises of jobs and infrastructure development that rarely materialize. In Nigeria, they initially offered better terms, added Dr. Konate. But the contracts contained clauses that eventually reduced the government's share to less than 15%. The environmental damage has been catastrophic, with minimal accountability. Traoré absorbed this information, his expression revealing nothing. And what leverage will Durand bring to this meeting? Defense Minister Ouagadougou cleared his throat. 3 types, Mr. President. Financial. They'll offer immediate cash transfers to our treasury, knowing our economic situation is precarious. Political. They have significant influence in Western capitals that can either support or undermine our government. And if those fail, history suggests they might explore less diplomatic options. The implication hung in the air. Coups, assassinations, and civil unrest had followed resource discoveries in other African nations when leaders had resisted Western corporate interests. "Victor Durand has arrived, Mr. President," announced an aide from the doorway. Traoré stood, straightening his military uniform. "Remember, we reveal nothing about our intentions. This is merely an exploratory conversation." Victor Durand entered the presidential office with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than what most Burkinabe earned in a year, he extended his hand with a practiced smile. "President Traoré, an honor to meet you at last. Your reputation as a forthright leader precedes you." "Mr. Durand," Traoré responded, his handshake firm but brief. "Welcome to Burkina Faso. Though I must say, your visit comes with surprising speed and without the usual diplomatic protocols." Durand's smile didn't waver. "In business, President Traoré, timing is everything. And I believe we both know why I'm here." Over the next hour, Durand outlined EnerGlobal's proposal, a partnership that would quickly bring Burkina Faso's oil to market. The terms were presented as generous, a 35% share for Burkina Faso, higher than their usual offer, Durand emphasized. Construction of a refinery, 2,000 local jobs, and an immediate signing bonus of $500 million. $500 million transferred to your national treasury within 48 hours of signing, Durand said, leaning forward. "Think of what that could do for your country, Mr. President." Traoré listened without interruption, his face revealing nothing. When Durand finished, he simply asked, "And if we were to develop these resources ourselves, or seek partners with more favorable terms?" Something flashed in Durand's eyes, a momentary break in his composed demeanor. "With respect, Mr. President, oil extraction requires expertise and capital that Burkina Faso simply doesn't possess. As for other partners," he smiled again, "I would caution against options that might alarm your traditional allies in the West." "I see," said Traoré, rising to indicate the meeting was concluded. "We will consider EnerGlobal's proposal along with others. My government will need time to analyze all aspects carefully." Durand stood, momentarily surprised by the abrupt ending. "President Traoré, these opportunities are time-sensitive. The global market moves quickly. I had hoped we might reach a preliminary understanding today." "Mr. Durand," Traoré replied calmly, "Burkina Faso has waited centuries for its resources to benefit its people. We can afford a few more weeks of patience to ensure that happens correctly." As Durand left the palace, his polished exterior had hardened into something colder. In his limousine, he immediately made a phone call. The direct approach didn't work, he said to the person on the other end. "Move to Plan B." Over the next week, Ibrahim Traoré watched as the pressure mounted from multiple directions. International financial institutions suddenly raised concerns about Burkina Faso's debt sustainability. Western media published articles questioning the stability of Traoré's government. French diplomatic communications took on a noticeably cooler tone. Most concerning were the reports from Colonel Diallo about unusual movements of money into the accounts of several military officers and government officials. The pattern was familiar. The groundwork for a potential coup was being laid. During an emergency meeting with his closest advisors, Traoré outlined his strategy. "We cannot match EnerGlobal's financial resources or Western political influence," he acknowledged. "But we have 3 advantages they don't expect us to use." He pointed to a map of Africa projected on the wall. First, regional solidarity. "I've had confidential discussions with leaders of other African nations who have faced similar situations. They've agreed to form a united front with us." Second, he continued, transparency with our own people. "Tomorrow I will address the nation, revealing everything about the oil discovery and the external pressures we face. An informed population is harder to manipulate." Defense Minister Ouagadougou looked concerned. "And the third advantage, Mr. President?" Traoré smiled for the first time in days. "The third is that they think we're alone. They don't know about our new partners." The next morning, Traoré addressed the nation in a televised broadcast that was also streamed online to reach the maximum audience. "My fellow Burkinabe," he began, his voice steady and resolute. "Today I share news that could transform our nation's future. Significant oil reserves have been discovered in our eastern region." He went on to explain the discovery's potential impact, EnerGlobal's proposal, and the pressure tactics that had followed. "Throughout Africa's history, our natural resources have enriched others while leaving our own people in poverty. This will not be Burkina Faso's story. Our oil will benefit our children, build our schools and hospitals, and strengthen our independence." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Citizens took to the streets not in protest, but in celebration and support. "Our oil, our future" began trending across West Africa. In villages and cities alike, people organized community meetings to discuss what the oil discovery could mean for their futures. Meanwhile, in New York, representatives from Burkina Faso were meeting with executives from the Chinese National Petroleum Corporation and India's Oil and Natural Gas Corporation. Unlike Western companies, these Eastern corporations were willing to accept majority Burkinabe ownership and more favorable revenue-sharing terms in exchange for access to new reserves at a time of increasing global competition. In Paris, Victor Durand was furious as he watched his carefully laid plans unravel. The African Solidarity Campaign had made it politically difficult for Western governments to apply overt pressure. The public transparency had complicated efforts to sow division within Burkina Faso. And now, Eastern competitors were threatening to secure the deal EnerGlobal had assumed was theirs for the taking. "This is unacceptable," Durand snapped at his team of strategists and former intelligence operatives. "If Traoré signs with the Chinese or Indians, it sets a dangerous precedent across the region. We need more aggressive intervention." His security chief, a former French foreign intelligence officer, slid a folder across the table. "We've identified several military officers who remain receptive to our approach. General Traoré in particular has expressed dissatisfaction with Traoré's leadership." Durand nodded. "How quickly can we move?" "The plan could be operational within 72 hours. But sir, a coup at this particular moment carries significant risks of backfiring." "We're out of options," Durand replied coldly. "Proceed." What Durand didn't know was that his communications had been compromised. For weeks, Burkina Faso's newly enhanced intelligence unit, with assistance from friendly nations, had been monitoring EnerGlobal's encrypted channels. Colonel Diallo placed a transcript of Durand's conversation on Traoré's desk. "They're planning a military action within 3 days, Mr. President. General Traoré is their primary asset." Traoré studied the document. "And General Traoré himself?" "Under surveillance, sir. He met with an EnerGlobal representative yesterday at a property outside the city." "Good," said Traoré. "Now we prepare our countermove. But not against Traoré. Not yet. We'll target something more valuable to Durand." In EnerGlobal's London headquarters, an emergency board meeting had been called. The company's stock had mysteriously plunged 15% in a single day after anonymous leaks to financial news outlets detailed the corporation's history of environmental violations and alleged involvement in political destabilization across Africa. More disturbingly, highly sensitive internal documents about EnerGlobal's operations in Nigeria and Chad had appeared on whistleblower websites. Documents showing systematic bribery, environmental cover-ups, and coordination with intelligence agencies to undermine governments that resisted their terms. Victor Durand faced angry shareholders and board members demanding explanations. The source of the leaks remained unidentified, but their timing left little doubt about their connection to the Burkina Faso situation. In Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré met with General Traore. The meeting was private, with only the two men present. "You've been speaking with representatives of EnerGlobal," Traoré said calmly, placing photographs on the desk between them. They showed Traoré meeting with known EnerGlobal operatives. The general's face remained impassive. "Is speaking with foreign business interests now treason, Mr. President?" "Speaking, no. Planning a military coup, yes." Traoré added another document to the desk, a transcript of Traoré's conversations. Color drained from the general's face. "This is fabricated. I demand—" "What you've done could warrant execution under our laws," Traoré interrupted. "But that's not why I called you here." Traoré leaned forward. "I want you to continue your meetings with EnerGlobal. You will tell them exactly what they want to hear. You will accept their resources, and you will feed them exactly the information we provide." Understanding dawned on Traoré's face. "You want me to become a double agent? I'm offering you a path to redemption, General. Serve your country now, or face the consequences of betraying it." Traoré studied Traoré's face, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. "What do you need me to do?" The trap was set. Over the next week, General Traoré fed EnerGlobal exactly what Traoré wanted them to believe: that military support for a coup was growing, that Traoré was planning to sign a deal with Chinese interests within days, and that security around the presidential palace would be reduced due to forces being deployed to protect the oil discovery site. Victor Durand, growing desperate as his company's stock continued to fall and legal investigations loomed, accelerated the coup plans. Resources poured into Ouagadougou, money, weapons, and several private military contractors to advise the coup leaders. What EnerGlobal didn't realize was that every movement was being tracked, every communication monitored. The weapons were intercepted and replaced with non-functional equivalents. The contractors were identified and placed under surveillance. The money was traced to its destinations, providing a comprehensive map of corruption within Burkina Faso's government and military. On the night the coup was to begin, Ibrahim Traoré was not at the presidential palace as EnerGlobal's intelligence had indicated. Instead, he was at a military command center, surrounded by loyal officers. "All units in position, Mr. President," reported Colonel Diallo. "The coup forces are moving as predicted." On screens around the room, they watched as confused coup participants realized they had been set up. Their weapons didn't fire. Expected reinforcements never materialized. And at every strategic location, they encountered heavily armed loyalist forces waiting for them. The coup was over before it truly began, with minimal bloodshed. By dawn, all the conspirators had been arrested, including several EnerGlobal operatives caught red-handed coordinating the action. 2 days later, Ibrahim Traoré stood before the United Nations General Assembly in New York. The hall was packed, with unusual attendance from world leaders. What had begun as a dispute over oil rights in a small African nation had escalated into an international incident with far-reaching implications. "Distinguished representatives," Traoré began, his voice clear and firm, "I come before you today not merely as the president of Burkina Faso, but as a voice for nations whose sovereignty is routinely violated in the quest for natural resources." He detailed the sequence of events: the oil discovery, EnerGlobal's pressure tactics, and the attempted coup with evidence directly linking it to the corporation and several Western intelligence agencies. "For too long, the narrative has been that African nations cannot manage their own resources," he continued. "That we need the expertise of multinational corporations who take the lion's share of profits while leaving environmental devastation and political instability in their wake." On screens throughout the hall, evidence appeared: internal EnerGlobal documents, banking transactions, communications between company executives and intelligence operatives. "This evidence has been provided to international prosecutors," Traoré announced. "But legal accountability for past actions is only the beginning. Today, I propose a new framework for resource development. one that respects national sovereignty, environmental standards, and equitable profit sharing. He outlined the Ouagadougou Principles, a set of guidelines for natural resource development that prioritized majority local ownership, environmental protection, revenue transparency, and technology transfer to build local capacity. Burkina Faso will develop its oil resources according to these principles, he declared. We are open to partnerships with corporations and nations who accept these terms. Several have already agreed. In the audience, representatives from China, India, Brazil, and surprisingly several European nations nodded in agreement. They had already signed memoranda of understanding based on the new framework. The era of resource colonialism must end, Traore concluded, not just for Burkina Faso, but for all nations whose wealth has too long enriched others. We extend our hands in partnership, but we will no longer surrender our birthright. The speech received a standing ovation from the majority of the assembly. Even representatives from nations traditionally aligned with Western corporate interests recognized that the landscape had shifted. In the days that followed, EnerGlobal's stock collapsed completely as investigations expanded across multiple jurisdictions. Victor Durand resigned and later faced criminal charges for authorizing illegal activities. The corporation itself was forced into a restructuring that dramatically altered its approach to international operations. 6 months later, Ibrahim Traoré stood at the oil drilling site in eastern Burkina Faso. What had once been a simple water exploration project was now a sophisticated operation, with engineers and technicians from Burkina Faso working alongside experts from a consortium of international partners who had accepted the Ouagadougou Principles. The first phase of development was proceeding ahead of schedule. More importantly, Burkinabe citizens were being trained at every level of operation, from extraction to refining, ensuring that within a decade the country would possess the expertise to manage its resources independently. Nearby, construction had begun on a technical university focused on petroleum engineering and environmental science, funded by the initial revenues from the oil production. Mr. President, said Dr. Konate, who had been appointed Minister of Natural Resources, the latest production figures exceed our projections. The first shipments will begin next month. Traore nodded, watching a group of young Burkinabe engineers examining equipment. And the revenue distribution? As mandated by the new constitution, Dr. Konate replied. 30% to infrastructure development, 25% to education and healthcare, 20% to the Sovereign Wealth Fund for future generations, 15% to environmental protection and remediation, and 10% directly to citizens through the Universal Basic Dividend Program. This carefully designed framework had been overwhelmingly approved by Burkinabe citizens in a national referendum. It ensured that the benefits of the oil discovery would be widely shared and sustainably managed. The Black Gold War had been won not through military might, but through strategic thinking, international solidarity, and a commitment to transparency. Burkina Faso had not only secured control of its resources, but had also created a model that other nations were beginning to adopt. As Traoré prepared to leave, a young engineer approached him hesitantly. "Mr. President," she said, "I wanted to thank you. I'm from a village near here. Before the oil discovery, my only option would have been to leave Burkina Faso to pursue my career. Now, I can help build my country's future." Traoré smiled, recognizing in her the future he had fought for. A Burkina Faso where resources serve the people, not foreign interests. "The oil beneath our soil is valuable," he told her. "But the real wealth of Burkina Faso has always been its people." In capitals across Africa, other leaders watched Burkina Faso's transformation with interest. The resource curse that had plagued the continent for generations was not inevitable after all. A new path was possible. One where Africa's vast natural wealth could finally benefit Africans themselves. And in boardrooms of multinational corporations around the world, executives were being forced to reckon with a changing reality. The old playbook of exploitation and manipulation was becoming increasingly untenable. Countries like Burkina Faso were no longer willing to surrender their resources for a fraction of their worth. The Black Gold War had ended, but its impact would continue to reverberate for generations to come. Not just in Burkina Faso, but across a continent awakening to its power and potential.